Tuesday, April 28th meeting of the Lewis and Clark County Commission. Please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I want to take a minute and introduce everybody on this end of the room. I'm going to start over here with Jenny Chambers. She is the Director of Public Works and Planning. Next is Brandy Grandy, who is Recording Secretary. She's going to keep track of all the proceedings of today's meeting. Commissioner Andy Hunthausen, Commissioner Candace Payne, and I'm Chair of the Commission this year, Tom Rolfe. Over to my right, Nico Hash and TJ Murphy are representatives of the county attorney's office, trying to keep us legal and headed forward. And Roger Baltz is our chief administrative officer. In front of the bar, on your side of the bar, there's a place to sign in. We'd like to have you everybody that's here today sign in and then leave us some contact information in case we need to get back to you. We do have also agendas there for your convenience to know what's on today's agenda. We'll start off today with consent action item. Mr. Baltz, if you'll present that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. You have one item today. It's item 3A on the agenda. It's Resolution 2026-28, declaring county property surplus property. Staff recommends approval of that item. Thank you, Commissioners.
Are there any questions from the Commission about that item? Any questions from the Commissioner? Is there any public comment on the resolution declaring public property surplus property? Any public comment? Seeing none, do we have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I'd move that we approve Resolution 2026-28, declaring county property surplus property, consent action item 3A.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? Any discussion from the Commission on the motion? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor of approving Resolution 2026-28, declaring county property surplus property, as explained by Mr. Baltz, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Now on to our regular action items. The first one is a bid award for the Courthouse Sidewalk improvement.
Good morning, Chair Rolfe, Commissioners. I'm Audra Zacherl, Assistant Director of Public Works. On April 14th, one bid was opened for the Courthouse Sidewalk Improvement Project. The project generally consists of the replacement of concrete sidewalk, curb and gutter along the west side of North Ewing Street, partial replacement of curb and gutter on the east side of North Ewing Street, roadway grading, asphalt pavement, and American with Disabilities Act improvements. Funding for this project is in the fiscal year 26 courthouse building capital improvement budget. All demolition of the existing sidewalks and road pavement will be performed by county crews. After reviewing the bid, staff recommends that the Board of County Commissioners award a unit price contract to Helena Sand and Gravel Incorporated, doing business as Montana Materials and Construction, for $197,069, with work to be completed within 30 days of a notice to proceed. Are there any questions?
Commissioners, do you have any questions for Audra?
Mr. Chair, just for the sake of education and understanding, just how this process works. We're at the award stage now. When we realize we have a project, how does that work? We put it out into the world, and it's a public opportunity for all to bid that are qualified and that can meet the specs. Can you just describe the process for us a little
Sure,
bit?
thank you. Chair Rolfe, Commissioners, for projects that are $80,000 and more, we do a public process in which we advertise for 2 different times, approximately a week apart. And we look for, or we ask any interested parties that would like to perform the project submit a bid. And we open that bid in a public meeting, and the bid has been sealed. So we open in a public meeting in front of everybody, and we read those bids. In this situation, we had one response. Typically, we have more than one. And then we take those bids under advisement. A committee looks at them, makes sure that they meet all the specifications that were in the bid documents. And then we come back within a 2-week period to the commission, and we recommend an award based on the bids that were submitted.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Any other questions from the commission? Any other questions? All right. Is there any public comment on this item? Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, do we have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the bid award for the courthouse sidewalk improvements as explained by Audra Zacherl.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Does the commission have any discussion, anything they'd like to bring up about this item? Any discussion? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second. We'll move forward to a vote. All those in favor of awarding the courthouse sidewalk improvement project to Montana Materials and Construction according to their bid. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Next item on our agenda is a bid award for the 2026 Asphalt project.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. For the record, I'm Dan Karlin, County Engineer. On April 14th of 2026, 3 bids were opened for the 2026 asphalt projects. The projects generally consist of milling and overlaying portions of Valley Forge Road, Flowery Drive, and McHugh Lane, and paving portions of Applegate Road and West Custer Avenue. Funding for this project is from the road infrastructure budget for all bid items except items 5, 7, 9, 11, and 13, which are budgeted through individual RID funds and included in an overall project summary sheet approved by the Commission as part of the annual Public Works budget. After review of the bids, staff recommends awarding the contract to the low bidder, Montana Materials and Construction of Helena, Montana, for a total unit price bid amount of $456,279.00, and authorize the chair to sign all applicable contract documents. And I can stand for questions if you have any.
Do you have any questions? Commissioner Payne?
Dan, I just wanted this reference to the paving of a portion of West Custer Avenue. Can you kind of give me an idea where that begins and where it ends?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Payne. So that is West Custer is from Henderson, which is the road that leads into the fairgrounds, west to the edge of Ryan Fields, where it heads north onto what's called Horseshoe Bend.
Okay, okay. This is not an impact on the part we're fighting with Department of Transportation and the City of Helena regarding Custer Avenue that is really beat up and nasty.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Payne, this is west of where that future roundabout is going to be. So the west leg of that. Yeah.
Good. Thanks.
All right. Commissioner Henshausen.
Mr. Chair, not to leave you out of a discussion about the process, Dan, Ms. Zacherl mentioned when I asked her the question about taking bids under advisement. In this case, we had 3 bids, and what the commission does is ask you and a committee to take the bids under advisement. What does that mean? What is that process? What are we looking at in that review of the bids to make sure that, and she did mention it, but I just thought we'd get a little more into the detail here.
Thank you for the question, Chairman Rolfe, Commissioner Hunthausen. So what we do when we take the bids under advisement is first off, we check the math on all of the bids. We make sure that the bid quantity that is estimated aligns with the bid amount that they put in for their unit cost, and that math totals out correctly. So we check that. We check to make sure that their bond that they submit with it, which is a bid bond, is executed correctly. We also make sure that all items on the bid form are filled out. So if there was an addendum, make sure they acknowledge that addendum on that bid form, as well as they have their bid actually signed by an authorized representative of the company that's offering the bid. That's basically the process. And then we verify all that, and then we make sure that we have the low bid identified, and then we go through the rest of the process.
Mr. Chair, if I could.
Commissioner Henhouse.
So assuming that all of the bids meet muster and they any of them would qualify, then we look at the best value for the taxpayer and we try to pick the lowest bid that is available.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Hunhausen, so yes, these are set up as a low bid. So barring any discrepancies within the bid, or when we do check if they are debarred through the state or federally, if they don't have anything that would eliminate them from being a candidate, we select the low bid.
Okay, yeah. I knew the answers to these. I just wanted to talk about them a little bit. We had an opportunity we have some folks with us today, so it's good to do that once in a while, remind ourselves how this works. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions from the commission? Any other questions from the commission? Is there any public comment on this item? Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, do we have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I would move that we award the bid for the asphalt project to Montana Materials and Construction of Helen, Montana, as presented by Engineer Karlin.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on the on the motion? Is there any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor of the bid award of the 2026 asphalt project to Montana Materials and Construction, as explained by Dan Karlin, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Next item on our agenda is a bid award for the 2026 crack sealing project.
Again, good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. I'm Dan Karlin, County Engineer. Also on April 14th of 2026, 4 bids were opened for the 2026 crack seal project. The project generally consists of routing cracks as required, cleaning all routable cracks and non-routable cracks, and sealing all cracks in asphalt pavement on various county roads, county bridges, and in various rural improvement districts. Funding for this project is from the road infrastructure budget for bid item 100. Bid items 200 and 300 are budgeted through individual RID funds and included in an overall project summary sheet approved by the Commission as part of the annual Public Works budget. After review of bids, staff recommends awarding the contract to the low bidder, Hard Drives Construction Incorporated of Billings, Montana, for a total unit price bid amount of $176,028.80, and authorize the chair to sign all applicable contract documents. And I can stand for questions you may have.
Are there any questions from the commission? And I see that we're 4 bids on this item, and we're looking at accepting the bid for $176,000, which was the lowest price bid of the 4. All right, thank you. Any other questions? Any other questions from the commission? Seeing none, is there any public comment on this item? Is there any public comment on this item? Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the award of the bid of hard drives as explained by Dan Karlin for the 2026 crack sealing project.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this? Is there any further discussion from the commission? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor of awarding the bid award for the 2026 crack sealing project to Hard Drives Construction Incorporated of Billings, Montana, for a total bid price of $176,200, or rather $176,028.80. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Our next item, an amendment number 2 to subrecipient agreement between Lewis and Clark County and Eastgate Village Water and Sewer.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. My name is Eliza Fiaschetti. I am the ARPA program and grant specialist with the Grants and Procurement Department. Before you today is a request to approve the second amendment to the subrecipient agreement between Lewis and Clark County and Eastgate Village Water and Sewer Association. The subrecipient agreement is to implement the American Rescue Plan Act direct allocation and minimum allocation grant awards necessary to implement the improvements to Eastgate Village water system. Through this award, the association is replacing the existing supply wells with a deep aquifer well and installing a new pump, transmission line, and emergency generator. This project is nearing completion and will be finished this summer. Amendment number 2 extends the period of performance from December 31st, 2025 to September 30th, 2026 to provide additional time for the association to fully complete the work. There are no other additions or modifications to the subrecipient agreement. This project is funded by both a direct allocation grant from Lewis and Clark County, as well as a minimum allocation grant provided by the Department of Natural Resource and Conservation. The minimum allocation grant is completed, and we have received a closeout letter from DNRC. Staff recommends approval. Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there questions from the commission? One question I might ask is, I recall the items to be paid for under the ARPA program from the federal government have to be completed by the end of calendar year 2026.
Correct, Mr. Chair.
And we thought this was going to be completed last year, but it's gone a little longer to be completed, and the idea is to have it done now by September 30th of this year.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, that is correct. All of the funds have to be expended by December 31st, 2026. This project was anticipated to be completed by December 31st, 2025, but given some challenges in getting some of the equipment and the construction, this has been delayed till this summer. We anticipate it being completed by June, but wanted to put in September 2025 or 2026 to give a little extra time.
All right. Other questions? Commissioner Hunthausen.
Mr. Chair, thank you. You may have already mentioned this in your comments, but just wanted to talk about the total amount of the award, the part that came from Lewis Clark County, part that came from the match from the state ARPA funds, and that just a little bit about that process. It's been a long time now since we've entertained this. So back when we were awarded ARPA funds, this part of the funding that was allowable for water and sewer type projects, folks could apply, and then that was evaluated, and we worked with state DNRC to recommend the best projects moving forward where we can make the biggest one-time help for our local communities, and this was one of the ones that was chosen. I guess just talking a little bit about that to remind people where this comes from. It's been a long road. Gosh, I don't know how many years now. 5 years. Getting the 5 signal back there from Ann. So it's been 5 years since we started this, and this was one of those awards that I think really is going to make a difference for this community. And just go ahead.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Hunthausen, yes, this is part of the $13.4 million that the county received from the ARPA, which is the American Rescue Plan Act funding, which was part of COVID funding. And this project, the total amount from the Department of Natural Resource and Conservation was $750,000. The local match was $514,000. And the total amount for the the direct allocation award, which was from Lewis and Clark County, was $125,000. And there's about $17,000 remaining for the direct allocation funding.
All right. Any other questions? Any other questions on this item? Seeing none, no other questions from the commission. Do we have any public comment? Any public comment on this? If you'll come forward and state your name.
Hello, I'm Jean Riley. I'm the president of the Eastgate Water Sewer Association. I want to thank you so much, and I'm going to fill you in because we had a meeting last night. We got an update on the project. And what's going on is the final process of the project and connecting everything. The contractor finally got all the approvals, and so they're hoping to start mid-May. So once they get going, we should be finished, and it should go fairly quickly. But we've been waiting for approvals from Department of Environmental Quality. It takes time, but I want to appreciate everything, and we're looking forward, and maybe we'll get a ribbon cutting when we're all done. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions for me?
Any questions? No. All right. Is there any other public comment? Any other public comment? Seeing none, do we have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I would move that we approve amendment number 2 to the subrecipient agreement between Lewis and Clark County and Eastgate Village Water and Sewer Association, Inc. as presented.
Second.
Is there any further discussion on this item?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Hunthouse.
just a comment, and sorry to use first names, but Eliza and Ann, thank you so much for your hard work on this. This is all of the ARPA funding comes with significant strings. I'll just leave it at that. Federal funding that came down this way was required to be tracked in multiple ways and directions and upside down and all around, and it was pretty amazing. So I appreciate the work that's been done to really track these dollars and make sure that we're reporting them properly. I get a lot of the emails from the federal government saying, have you done all of these things? And I get to forward them on to Ann, which is really nice. And I just really appreciate reading through those, how complicated it is and how important it is to make sure we dot our I's and cross our T's. So we have great staff that does that. I just appreciate both of you. And then ultimately appreciating what these dollars have done in our community. And I'm really glad that if the federal government's going to allocate dollars, that we do everything we can to get them back to Montana and put them to good use. And we've done that, I think. So thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I can't say any better than what you did, Commissioner Hunthouse, and it's been a complicated process. Staff has been wonderful in working on this and tracking it and helping us to make best use of the ARPA money that was available. Again, thank you to the staff. Any other comments from the commission? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor of approving amendment number 2 to the subrecipient agreement between Lewis and Clark County and the Eastgate Village Water and Sewer Association, please say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Our next item is a contract between Lewis and Clark County and Go-To Communications.
Good morning, Chair Rolfe, Commissioners. I am Christina Cronick with the Customer Support Supervisor for the Information Technology and Services Department. I'm here today to request consideration and approval to sign a contract upgrading our current phone system. The existing phone system used throughout our organization was first released in 2009, and its last revision of software became available in 2019. The system has finally reached its end of support life in December of 2025. Beginning in June of 2025, the IT department began reviewing available options and chose to pursue a cloud-hosted voice over internet protocol phone solution to modernize communications, improve flexibility, and eliminate the need for on-premise equipment. After evaluating vendors, Go-To Communications was selected as the vendor providing the best overall value, offering strong support and adaptable solutions for the entire organization. This is a 5-year agreement with a total contract value of $385,371.60, or an annual cost of $77,074.32, beginning in fiscal year 27, with a one-time startup cost for fiscal year 26 of $27,235.63 for phones and other devices. The annual and one-time costs are both planned for within the normal ITNS operating budget. This upgrade will deliver a modern, cost-effective, and scalable communication platform for the entire organization with no projected increases to the current phone system costs. Currently, the phone system is considered exempt from competitive procurement in county policy. The proposed contract was developed under a cooperative agreement called the Interlocal Purchasing System, or TIPS. This was reviewed and approved by both county procurement and the county attorney's office. Staff recommends approval of the contract with a total cost of $385,371.60, or $77,074.32 annually, plus the one-time startup cost of $27,235.63, and authorize the chair to sign. This concludes my presentation on the new phone system, and I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Any questions?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Henhouse.
Sorry, I'm just this one time I'm going to speak up.
He's so shy, isn't he?
Thank you. Appreciate it. So I just want to talk about the old and new. The old system, end of its service life as well. There's all kinds of equipment that we have on site that we've had to maintain and upgrade and upkeep and all of that. And going to this new system, we don't have any of that. It's all cloud-based. And so we're not going to be doing, checking the box and fixing wires and doing all the things that we used to have to do around here. Just talk about that modernization and some of the things that we can maybe do with this one compared to the old one. And you explained it to us, but I think it's worth talking about that we're really advancing and moving forward, and this has to be done essentially.
Yes, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Hunthausen, the new phone system, as you mentioned, is a cloud-hosted system. It will eliminate the actual hardware that exists in our current environment. It is a voice over internet protocol, or a VoIP system. So that is a phone system that travels over the internet as opposed to having on-premise equipment. So there will be no need to manage equipment in our environment. Everything will be managed by our provider, Go-To Communications. And that is included in our monthly fees or yearly fees that I've described to you. With that is a lot of flexibility. We've talked about this individually with you guys. This offers you the ability to have a software-based phone installed on your computer, a desk phone at your desk if you so desire, or have an application installed on your mobile phone for mobility. So you really are, we really are moving forward into the current century with our phone system and providing more mobility to our diverse organization.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Henhouse.
Maybe more than an old guy wants, but about the funding. So it's in the budget, as you said, and we've been anticipating that we're going to have to do this for some time. So there's been an element of savings and anticipation of this outlay, correct? It's not a hit to this year's budget or a new tax or a new expense that we have to incur. It's something we've anticipated.
Yes, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Hunthausen, this is a planned for expense. We started doing the research back in June of 2025, knowing that the phone system was going to need to be replaced. We have some reserves in our fiscal year 26 budget that will cover the hardware costs, which would be the phones and other devices needed in our environment. And then the annual costs are already planned for in each fiscal year.
Great.
So no increases to our current plan.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
All right. Well, we appreciate when we get new and upgraded equipment, when it can be done for essentially what we've been paying for some time. This, I should mention too, this is a joint, our information and technology and services is a part of our organization that is jointly funded by the city and the county. So this will affect phone systems for city employees as well as county employees. And then it's jointly funded by them, but the budgeting is managed through the county. Anything else? Anything else you'd like to bring up? All right. Seeing no more discussion from the on this item, is there any public comment? Is there any public comment? I see no public comment. So do we have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the contract between Lewis and Clark County and Go-To Communications Incorporated as presented by Christina Krennick.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion from the commission? Commissioner Payne.
This is an old-fashioned look at this, but whenever anybody tells me that something is to the cloud, I think, oh, isn't that nice? There it is. And then I hear the reality of how big data centers are. And the cloud does not live up in the sky. It lives on 5,000 acres of property that we will never be able to use for anything else. I'm pretty sure these data centers will provide, they're noisy, they take up space, they take a lot of water. I know that this is the way things are going to go, but I just have some concerns about this pie in the sky. I could say the cloud. I'm not sure that our friends in technology are being entirely honest with us as to the impact this will eventually have on all of our, and maybe our children or grandchildren, but this is another environmental impact that we are going to, it's going to come home and we'll be haunted by it eventually. But for now, let's go forward and do what we got to do.
All right. Any other comment on the motion? Is there any other comment on the motion from the commission? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor of approving the contract between Lewis and Clark County and Go-To Communications Incorporated, as explained by Christina Krennick, please say aye.
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 Aye. Motion, all those opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, we have our one more item on our regular agenda, Resolution 2026-27. It's a resolution to amend the regulations for Special Zoning District number 43. We'll take use pretty much the same format that we've been using. I assume that a fair number of the folks here are interested in this one. We'll be introducing the staff will be introducing the resolution and make the presentation on it. Commissioners will then be able to ask the staff questions. We'll then ask for public comment, and after that we'll proceed as we've been doing on a regular basis. So, Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Chairman, Commissioners. As mentioned, Phil Gonzalez here with Community Development and Planning. I'm a land use planner here. On the agenda and before you, as you can see on the screen, is for your consideration is Resolution 2026-27. This resolution is for a proposed text amendment to the Special Zone District number 43, commonly referred to as the East Helena Valley Zoning District. Staff has prepared a staff report that was provided to you containing the presentation materials, public comments received up to April 23rd. Please note that the applicant for these proposed text amendments is Community Development and Planning. Chairman, Commissioners, this proposed text amendment was presented to the Planning and Zoning Commission on April 16th, as is required with Part 1 Zone District text amendments. The proposal goes before the Planning and Zoning Commission for a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners, where we are here today. Commission members, I would like to direct your attention to the 3 areas within the zoning regulations that staff is proposing to amend. They include the special restrictions section, special restrictions definitions, and amendments to the nonconforming uses and structures section. The proposed text amendments have been provided in the staff report. Again, I would like to go over some of the geographical boundaries of the zoning district that we were discussing here today. You'll see it here outlined in red. You'll notice the district is bounded by Canyon Ferry to the north, Valley Drive to the west, portion along Lake Helena Drive, portion extending further east, and the south bounded by Lewis Street. The district is just north of the city of East Helena. The zone district is adjacent to the La Casa Grande subdivision, Eastgate subdivision, and the Red Fox Meadow subdivision. The zone district is approximately 1.63 square miles, 1,045 acres. There are approximately 205 individual parcels and 136 distinct address points. Current land uses appear to include single-family residences, agricultural uses, and some non-residential uses such as a water treatment facility, mini storage, and a gravel pit. Commissioners, the East Helena Valley Special Zone District number 43 was adopted via resolution by this commission on July 10th of 2008. The commissioners adopted the boundary of the zoning district and the regulations, including the allowed land uses and the bulk requirements, such as setbacks. All that work was initiated by local residents of the district at that time, alongside community development and planning staff. The goal of the zoning district can be best summed up in the statement of purpose. The purpose of this district is to accommodate and protect the single use of single-family dwelling units and associated agricultural land uses, while promoting and preserving the rural residential atmosphere of the area and enhancing the aesthetic character and property values of the area. Commissioners, since 2008, no amendments have been made to the zoning regulations or the boundary of the zone district. Commissioners, I want to spend just a few minutes discussing our Part 1 zoning districts to get better context about what we are discussing here today and why the county is proposing these particular text amendments. Now, Lewis and Clark County has 35 Part 1 zone districts that were adopted starting in 1973. The most recent one was adopted in 2020. The vast majority of these Part 1 zone districts are within the Helena Valley, as you can see on the map on the screen. Up until recently, these zone districts were the only type of land use zoning that exists in the county. Now, Part 1 zone districts are unique in that they allow residences within a community to work with the county to create a zone district boundary with the land use regulations and essentially hand it to the county to manage and enforce. Part 1 zone districts have been an effective land use tool for the county, though as you can see, over time, it's created a bit of a complex patchwork of zoning that you can see on the screen here, containing different land use regulations, definitions, and planning processes. But now I'd like to discuss our Part 1 zoning districts and how they relate to the growth policy, as well as some of the changes in planning and planning objectives in the county that we've seen over the last couple of decades. So as you are aware, the growth policy is a non-regulatory, long-range planning document created by counties or municipalities to guide growth, land use, and infrastructure decisions over a period of time. Now, the Part 1 zone districts have been supported by the growth policy. Specifically, the 2004 Lewis and Clark growth policy called out the usefulness of working to create Part 1 zoning districts, as at the time the county lacked the comprehensive county-initiated zoning, or the Part 2 zoning, as we call it. Now, Part 2 zoning, where the county would be looked at from a more comprehensive perspective to plan long-term development, is in comparison to the Part 1 zoning districts, which typically looked at a closer individual neighborhood land use concerns. The county adopted the 2016 update to the growth policy that made significant recommendations, proposing instead that the county begin looking and adopting that wide-ranging Part 2 zone districts in the valley. And a few years later, that's exactly what happened. In 2020, the county adopted for the first time that comprehensive Part 2 zoning called the Helena Valley Zoning Regulations. So here on the screen, you can see those adopted zoning districts. You can see these, the pink hatch that extends throughout the valley. That is the rural residential. The green here, and here is our suburban residential. And then our yellow here, here, and here are our urban residential zoning districts. So these zoning districts are essentially laid out throughout the valley, though those Part 1 districts obviously remain and continue to remain. Commissioners, in the summer of 2025, this commission adopted a new growth policy, the 2025 growth policy. That document looked at and gave a number of policy recommendations to a variety of topics, including housing, economic development, environmental concerns, as well as land use and zoning. One of the main policy action recommendations that was related to land use, specifically our Part 1 zoning districts, stated, and you can see here on the screen, to quote, review existing Part 1 zoning districts and identify those that are outdated or difficult to administer. Eliminate or revise these districts to align with current planning goals and streamline the zoning processes. Further, it states, limit the use of Part 1 zone districts to well-defined and strategic purposes that align with the growth policy. Implement guidelines to ensure that any new districts are thoughtfully planned and contribute positively to the county's development goals. So, Commissioners, the county has begun a process to implement these policy recommendations found in the growth policy. The county is currently reviewing all 35 Part 1 zone districts to look where more clarification can be made, where text amendments can bring the regulations into alignment with the growth policy and the new comprehensive Helena Valley zoning regulations, as well as streamlining zoning processes across zoning districts. So this text amendment for Special Zone District number 43 proposal is likely the first of many proposals that we will bring forth to this commission in the future. Commissioners, again, I want to redirect ourselves back to the proposed amendments before you today. Staff has brought these three sections of the District 43 to amend. These proposed amendments have been provided, as I mentioned, in your staff report. Language that was struck through is proposed for removal. Language that is underlined and bolded is language that's proposed to be added to the regulations. And again, to summarize those amendments, staff is recommending the removal of special restrictions land use categories, those special restrictions use definitions, and amending language within the nonconforming section that would allow nonconforming uses to expand with an approved conditional use permit. Commissioners, looking at that first text amendment proposal, special restrictions land use categories. Currently, the zoning regulations have 3 categories of land uses. Permitted uses, or land uses that are allowed within the zone district by right, meaning essentially that as long as a property owner abides by all other bulk requirements such as setbacks, building heights, parking requirements, the property owner may implement that land use on their property with no additional zoning review. These land uses are reflected in that first column, but essentially some uses such as single family, duplexes, daycare facilities, livestock, home occupations, guest houses. The next land use category is the conditional use, which is the middle column. These are land uses that the zoning believes are appropriate or can exist within the zone district. They just need to be reviewed and approved with a conditional use permit. A conditional use permit application is submitted by a property owner or developer to the county to evaluate whether the use proposal meets a list of specific criteria before it can be approved. The third list of land uses, the zoning regulations, are the special restrictions, which the county is proposing to remove, is defined as uses expressly prohibited. Some of those examples include casinos, landfills, truck storage, machinery storage. Again, staff is recommending the removal of the special restrictions category. Now, commissioners, as I stated previously at the previous public hearing, the removal of the special restrictions category will not allow those uses to be introduced into the district. No other uses other than those listed under permitted and conditional are allowed within this zone district. Staff believes that the special restrictions land use section is unnecessary, duplicative, and confusing. Commissioners, when we compare Special Zone District number 43 to all other zoning districts in the county, including all 35 of the Part 1s and Part 2 Helena Valley zoning, all utilize a permitted uses and conditional use land use categories. Further, staff does not believe that this removal of the special restrictions section conflicts with the zoning district's protection of single-family dwelling units and associated agricultural land uses, as the county is not permitting any new uses to be implemented in the zone district. From a regulations perspective, it is what we call best practices to not include a special restrictions land use section alongside a permitted or conditional use land use section. Again, as I mentioned previously, in 2008, at the time of the adoption of these regulations, staff had advocated to not include the special restrictions section into the regulations. The second text amendment the county is proposing is related to the first, which is to remove all of the special restrictions land use definitions from the definition sections of the regulations. You will see in the rear of the regulations, most if not all of them are defined, the land uses. Obviously, if they are no longer listed in the regulations, there's no need for their definition. Staff believes this to be an appropriate action, would not conflict with any land use plans or zoning regulations. It would simply be a cleanup of the regulations at that point. The third and final proposed text amendment of the zoning regulations is amending language within the nonconforming section of the zoning, specifically both nonconforming uses and structures. Now, a nonconforming use is defined, as you'll see on the screen, as a lawful land use or structure that was in existence on a property prior to zoning going into effect, that would not be permitted or allowed once the zoning went into effect. So essentially, a land use or a structure, once the zoning goes into effect, becomes grandfathered, so to speak. Chairman, Commissioners, here on the screen is the non-conforming section of the regulations with the proposed amendments. Please note the amendments are both to the non-conforming uses and non-conforming structures. Under the fourth bullet, changes permitted to non-conforming uses, staff has added structures. We are describing both non-conforming uses and structures. Staff proposes to delete number 2 and number 4. These are directly related to the allowed expansion of nonconforming structures. Staff believes they are duplicative in this document and a little bit confusing. While we would allow number 3 to remain, which states a structure conforming with respect to use, but not conforming with respect to height, setback, or lot coverage, may be altered or extended if the alteration or extension does not further deviate from these regulations. Staff believes this language is sufficient to allow nonconforming structures to expand. It is more consistent seen across both our Part 1 and our Part 2 zoning districts. The next proposed amended language is specifically the nonconforming uses. Staff proposes to remove the second bullet, which states, quote, "The nonconforming use of land or structures shall not be expanded either on the same or adjoining property," and add a new line of text as number 2 under the changes permitted. A nonconforming use may be expanded subject to a conditional use permit within the confines of the lot or parcel of land upon which it is located, or on lands adjacent to this use under the same ownership at the time of the original resolution before the district became effective. So to summarize, the proposed amendment to nonconforming use section is to remove some of the confusing language regarding nonconforming structures, remove language prohibiting nonconforming uses from expanding, and adding language allowing nonconforming uses to expand with an approved conditional use permit. Commissioners, staff has done an analysis of all 35 Part 1 zoning districts in the county and how they handle nonconforming uses and structures. What was determined essentially was a lack of consistency among all Part 1 zoning districts, treating nonconforming uses and structures different and slightly different. There is some commonality among those that just outright not allow expansions. There are 19 of those Part 1 zone districts, and only one of the Part 1 zone districts currently allows an expansion of a nonconforming use with an approved conditional use permit. Commissioners, planning staff believes the proposed changes to the nonconforming section are in alignment with Special Zone District Number 43 state of intent, as an approved conditional use permit is needed to demonstrate compliance to the CUP criteria, the conditional use permit criteria. That criteria is laid out already in the regulations, but essentially is there to evaluate impacts to a proposed use development and whether that development should be permitted within the district. Of the growth policy, again, it states in Action 9.2A to revise our Part 1 zone districts to align with current planning goals and streamline the zoning processes across zoning districts. Staff has reviewed the 35 Part 1 zoning districts and found the inconsistencies regarding nonconforming uses and structures an issue and seeks to bring conformity to those zoning processes. Of the Part 2 comprehensive county-initiated zoning, the proposed amendments would be consistent with the Helena Valley zoning, which currently allows for the expansion of nonconforming uses and structures with an approved CUP. So in conclusion, and the overview of those amendments, staff is proposing amendments to special restrictions definitions, and the nonconforming uses and structures. Staff believes that they can be brought into compliance with the county's growth policy, more in alignment with our Part 2 zoning district, and believe that this work to review and recommended changes to all Part 1 zoning districts will be part of our long-term planning efforts to bring planning practices and comprehensive planning to the Community Development and Planning Office. As part of the review of the proposed text amendments, staff has publicly noticed this public hearing, as well as the April 16th Planning and Zoning Commission required in state statutes, with a notice in the independent record, a minimum of 3 signs posted on site at least 15 days prior to the public hearing. Staff does do additional noticing, other than that, what is legally required, including notifying all property owners within the zoned area of this hearing. Staff has received 16 letters of public comment at the time of the writing of this staff report, which was also included in the Planning and Zoning Commission. Those have been included in the staff report in attachment B. I will note none of the letters were in support of staff's proposed text amendments. Staff received, in addition, 5 public comments after the completion and publishing of the staff report. And I will provide them to you now. I enter them so they can be entered into the record, and you will have a chance to review them. Chairman, Commissioners, I want to briefly summarize the April 16th Planning and Zoning Commission public hearing regarding these proposed text amendments, which we are discussing here today. That summary was included in the staff report in section 4. Similar to this meeting, staff provided a staff report with our presentation, all the public comment that had been received up to the point of the publishing of the staff report. After the presentation that staff provided, staff took questions from the board. At that point, the chair requested public comment. 14 individuals provided a public comment. Most of the comments were surrounded around concerns regarding the removal of the special restrictions land use category, concerns regarding the land uses, potential land uses being implemented into the zone district, as well as the expansion of the non-conforming use section with an approved conditional use permit could potentially lead to an expansion of an existing gravel pit. Additional concerns surrounding this topic included impacts to drinking water, dust, traffic, impacts to the existing road network with heavy trucks, and proximity of an expansion close to schools and residential uses, lighting impact, visual impacts in a rural area, and enforcement concerns from the state regulatory departments. After the public comment was provided, staff was given an opportunity to respond to these public comments. Afterwards, staff response, the public hearing was closed. The commission discussed the proposed text amendments. All public comments and public testimony received, staff's presentation, and the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval 7-0 of the proposed text amendments to this Board of County Commissioners. With that, staff is recommending this board approve Resolution 2026-27 to amend the regulations of Special Zone District number 43. Commission, this concludes my presentation. With that, I'm available for any questions you may have. Thank you.
Good. I've got a question for you, if I might. I've got a thing about casinos being too close to where kids are, near schools and whatnot. I see that the casinos are listed as in the special restrictions in the current writing of the law. What would do those casinos then become automatically available within the area because of the change being made?
Chairman, Commissioners, the special restrictions that staff is recommending be removed from these zoning regulations obviously are currently not allowed as they are special restrictions. The removal of this land use category would not allow any of those uses currently under the special restrictions to be added into the zone district. Currently, if these amendments go through for the special restrictions, only uses under permitted and conditional would be allowed. So the special restrictions land use category is removed. None of those land uses, including casinos, would be allowed into the zone district in the future.
So it isn't just automatically allowing those things that are listed. They still have to go through a process. Is that what I'm hearing?
Chairman, Commissioners, no. So those land uses would not be allowed through any process. They are prohibited because they are not listed under a permitted use or a conditional use. So if they're not allowed as of now under the special restrictions, removing that special restrictions land category would not allow those uses to be implemented in the zone district either.
Okay. Are there other questions from the commission?
Mr.
Commissioner
Chair,
Hunthausen.
I could. The confusion kind of speaks for itself here. No, is why this section should be removed. Can you go back in your presentation to where you started with the 3 categories? Yeah, there you go. So the two categories on the left, permitted uses and conditional uses, those are the only uses that today, and if the special restriction section was removed, are allowed. Correct?
Chairman, Commissioner, correct.
Yeah. So by removing this special restrictions section, it doesn't allow any of those. It continues to only allow the 2 boxes on the left. Those are the only allowable uses in this zoning district. And that if the special restrictions section was removed, the permitted uses and conditional uses and that having those 2 categories would be much more consistent with all of our other zoning districts, essentially, or most all of them. There's some stuff we have to still review and amend potentially, but essentially that's why we're doing this, is that this is inconsistent with how we have our zoning laid out in other Part 1 and Part 2 zoning, correct?
Chairman, Commissioner Hunthausen, that's correct.
So the special restrictions section is completely unnecessary and it is redundant, that only the permitted uses and the conditional uses are allowed in this zoning district. So just to clear it up. And the reason I said that over and over again is because what I've heard both on the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting and this meeting so far is the confusion that is out there still. The public comment says, oh, you're going to allow casinos now, you're going to allow this, you're going to allow that. And none of that's the case. Only the things that are under permitted uses are allowed or conditional uses. And the conditional uses are, if you want to do one of those, you have to come in and apply for a conditional use permit and go through a process, and it may be conditioned and all of that, correct?
Correct.
Correct. So the special restrictions section is unnecessary. And that's the whole point. And if we go back, go back one more. I think, is that where you had a couple more back to the growth policy? It's back a ways. There you go. That one. I mean, this is so our growth policy in this section 9.2, and in the action of 9.2a, it says we'll review Part 1 zoning districts and identify those that are outdated or difficult to administer, eliminate or revise these districts to align with current planning goals and streamline the zoning process. So that's the first 9.2a action. And the 9.2b action, limit the use of Part 1 zoning districts to well-defined and strategic purposes that align with the county's growth policy. So we're trying to align the zoning with the growth policy. That's the whole point. And we're going to do that with all of our Part 1 districts. And as you mentioned, there's a whole bunch of them that are out of line with our current growth policy that we're going to have a heavy lift here, as we had a year-long process to implement a new growth policy. And we had almost a decade-long process to put all the pieces in place to pass Part 2 zoning in our valley here. So it's been a process, and we got another heavy lift in front of us to go through all of our Part 1 districts and make them compatible with our current growth policy and Part 2 zoning. So just to finish that, it says Part 1 zoning districts to be well-defined, strategic purposes that align with the county's growth policy. Implement guidelines to ensure that any new districts are thoughtfully planned and contribute positively to the county's development goals. So we're trying to live by our own rules or guide here. This is a guide, not a regulatory document. But we are required, tell me if I'm wrong, somebody, I'm looking over there, that we are required that at least every 5 years to look at it, review it, and if there need to be changes, we need to make amendments to our growth policy. And we've made a large amendment to our growth policy. We have a new growth policy just passed in 2025 after over a year-long process. And as you mentioned at the outset, these zoning regulations were based on the 2004 growth policy. So in my mind, we have to. We put ourselves at risk if we don't look at and then update our zoning regulations to align with our current growth policy. And our legislature tells us we must do that, and that's why we have these guides to do that. So we're following the rules, if you will. In I'm speaking to the choir here, but I guess my question is that not why we're doing this? I mean, this is on the page right here. It seems obvious to me why we're doing this. And when you look at just the special restrictions section, it makes no sense to keep that in there because it's unnecessary and redundant, and we don't have that in any other place. And our growth policy tells us to look at these and review them and try to streamline our zoning processes and align them with current planning goals. Am I off base?
Chairman Commissioner Housen, that is correct, yes.
Okay. So from that perspective, the special use district, it's pretty straightforward to me and obvious. I understand that at first glance, and I appreciate people reading this and saying, gosh, if they eliminate this, does that mean all those things you can do all those things now? It absolutely does not mean that. If you go back to the 3 boxes, that one, I'll reiterate, it only means that these first 2 boxes, the permitted uses and the conditional uses, are the only things that can happen in that district, right? And so the special restrictions is unnecessary. And I'm trying to get clear on that because the majority of a good amount of the public comment that I read and heard was based on that somehow we're going to be allowing these things to happen, and it's just not the case. So, Mr. Chair, I'll stop there for the moment, but if there's other questions about the special restrictions portion, if that's what we're talking about right now, I'll stop there for the minute.
Other questions?
It's a good thing air is free, isn't it? You know? Some of the questions I was going to ask have been addressed by Commissioner Hunthausen. And one of my bugaboos, Tom referenced casinos, and mine is collections of dead cars, which I think would come under salvage and junkyards. Is that correct?
Chairman, Commissioners, if it's a land use that's specific to that property, that is the main purpose of that property. It's a commercial enterprise. That's likely the definition that would fall under salvage or junkyards. If a property owner just has cars on their property, that would probably be something different.
Is that a permitted use? I don't see it on the list.
The land use for salvage or junkyards is not a permitted use. It is currently located in the special restrictions land use category. So even if we remove that land use category, salvage or junkyards would not be allowed in any parcels within the zone district.
That's good. Thank you. The other issues of concern I had, you have addressed. I sometimes have a little trouble understanding you because you talk quickly and I'm a little deaf. So, but I think with the help of the slides that you have provided, that I have a better understanding of this. And I think this is something as responsible commissioners that we have to do in order to keep our rules consistent. And so it doesn't look like we are aiming rules at a certain group and allowing another group to do. So we have to balance those concerns. They have to be look at both sides and not, and also to keep in mind that when we were elected as county commissioners, we were asked, we are directed to make hard decisions. We don't, the easy ones, what the heck, nobody cares. But the hard ones, the people really care about, oftentimes the people who are absolutely pounding on the desk and if you do this, we're going to, the world will end. But the people who support this kind of thought out general ability to apply the laws evenly, they're out working. They don't show up. The ones who are unhappy, they show up. The ones who just think, go on, get your work done. This is all going to be taken care of. We don't see them. They don't stand up. They expect us to make the hard decisions. This is a hard decision, but in consideration of even-handedness and commonalities, I think this is something that we have to do. This is and you've told me that there are other special zoning districts that have similar quirks. Is that correct, Phil?
Chairman, Commissioners, yes, well, the staff has done an analysis of all 35 Part 1 zoning districts. We see
Could you talk slower?
Oh, I apologize. Commissioner Payne, staff has done an analysis of the 35 Part 1 zoning districts throughout the county. The consistent theme is the inconsistencies between land use designations, land use definitions, zoning processes that take, since we've had a long history of these Part 1 zoning districts going back to the early 70s. And many of them have not been updated, amended, and just kind of been allowed to exist. So staff at this point is been directed by our growth policy to begin reviewing all those 35 Part 1 zoning districts to look where we can find some commonality, streamlined zoning processes, and then bring them closer to the growth policy as well as our Part 2 zoning district.
So just to make sure I've got a handle on this, this sounds to me like we are trying to provide equal protections under the law, no matter if you live in special zoning district number 43 or if you live in, across the valley in another area that has special zoning, but it's not in this one, but it has, and so those will be addressed in the future. Is that correct?
Chairman, Commissioner, that's correct. Our plan is to begin looking at each one individually over one of our long-term planning goals here in community development and planning. Staff wants to see consistency between the zoning regulations, between our zoning processes, zoning application types, so that, yes, we do have consistency between our Part 1s, our Part 2 zoning districts, and as a planner, that is one of the long-term objectives of our department.
Thank you, Phil, and I appreciate your speaking more slowly when you talk to me.
Certainly.
But I think I have a pretty good understanding of what it is we're going to accomplish by this change. So thank you, Phil.
Do we have other questions from the commission? Any other questions to the staff?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Henhouse.
Mr. Gonzalez, if you could go forward, please. Yeah, the non-conforming. Yeah,
Oh,
this.
you mean on his displays? I thought he was going to step up.
Yeah, on the display. So the non-conforming use change. This also will make us more consistent with the Part 2 zoning. And
Chairman, Commissioner Heinhausen, that is correct. Staff analysis was to amend some of this language to reflect our Part 2 zoning districts, which allows non-conforming uses to expand with an approved conditional use permit.
okay, and non-conforming uses already, you described that as those uses that were in place prior to the zoning going into effect. So I understand that. And going forward, this change from a process perspective would not guarantee anybody anything. It would just allow for an application to expand their existing use or structure. Correct.
Commissioners, Chairman Commissioner, that is correct. The allowing of a non-conforming use to expand is with an approved conditional use permit. That permit is an application submitted by a property owner or developer with a non-conforming use on their property. Would go through a public process, and the application is there to prove by the property owner that the impacts of that development would not conflict with the criteria of the CUP found in the regulations.
And part of that criteria is the what's the term I'm looking for? The zoning
Intent.
overall intent. Thank you. Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. So the zoning intent, and then there's a series of criteria. And so any non-conforming use or structure could make application, but they'd have to meet those intent and criteria. And that would be a public process, go through much of what we've seen here prior to any decision on that.
Chairman Commissioner Heinhausen, that is correct, yes.
And again, this update is more consistent with our Part 2 zoning. It is, as we just read into the record about Section 9.2 of the growth policy about reviewing these districts and making them more consistent and aligned with current planning goals, streamlining the zoning process. So all of that is consistent with the intent of the new growth policy as well.
Chairman, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I may have more questions after we hear from the public.
Okay.
Thank you.
Other questions from the commission?
I have one. Phil,
Commissioner Payne.
thank you. So we have permitted uses, and then if it's not a permitted use, it's a conditional use. And if it's a conditional use, the landowner would have to get a conditional use permit. So what kind of, are the conditions standard for all 9, or are they different for each one? Or how do you figure out what conditions there are? Is it a moving target, or is this the same thing for everyone?
Chairman, Commissioner Payne, so the conditional use permit is a application process. It's seen in a variety of our Part 1 zone districts, also our Part 2 zoning district. Essentially, the application submitted by a property owner or developer would have to elaborate and explain how their proposed development would meet a certain list of criteria that seeks to investigate what impacts their development might have. So the application is standard. The requirement and the approval can only be met if the applicant meets all of those criteria, and that would be applied to all property owners that seek a conditional use permit.
So there, again, we're looking at providing equal protection for any of the citizens trying to come up with a new idea on how to use their property. So if I decided I would have a bed and breakfast establishment, what kind of criteria would the conditional use be? How do they make the decision? What's the questions asked?
Certainly, Chairman, Commissioner Payne. I have the list of criteria here. Back up slide. And a bit of the process. So if someone, a property owner within Special Zone District number 43, wanted a bed and breakfast on their property, they would submit an application. Public hearings would be arranged for the Planning and Zoning Commission, as well as this board, the Board of County Commissioners. There would be a public noticing requirements, including posted sign. It would be noticed in the independent record, and adjoining property owners would be notified of these public hearings. Now, the regulations provide the criteria in which a conditional use permit can be awarded to a property owner or developer. There are 4 subcategories: site suitability, appropriateness of design, availability of services and facilities, and immediate neighborhood impact. Underneath those are a list of criteria that the property owner or developer would have to demonstrate to the public boards that they meet those criteria. So essentially, it goes through that process to the Planning and Zoning Commission and then to the Board of County Commissioners with this particular application for a bed and breakfast as the example.
Or say for a casino or something, they're going to have to go through. So we've got this hearing, and then if somebody wants to put in a casino because it's an educational process for elderly people or something on that, but they would have to come in and then go through each of those. And if they could show that they
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Payne, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but casinos are not allowed. We're just confusing the issue here because only in those 2 boxes, those first 2 categories, are anything that's allowed.
So I should go back to the bed and breakfast. We're not allowing casinos anyway.
If you want to use a specific example, bed and breakfasts are one of the allowed uses with a conditional use permit.
Okay. So bed and breakfast, conditional use, so it has to have adequate access, no environmental constraints. So, and these criteria, if they could meet all of them, then it would be brought in front of the zoning board and eventually to the county commissioners to see if the bed and breakfast, we feel that it fits the criteria. Whether you do or not, the final decision is left up to people who are elected to do this. Is that right?
Chairman, Commissioner Payne, that is accurate. So a conditional use permit is the applicant attempting to demonstrate to Planning and Zoning Commission and you, the Board of County Commissioners, how they meet all of this criteria. Staff would likely provide a recommendation of their professional opinion, whether or not that development meets this criteria, but that decision will rest with this commission.
Oh, Phil, I think you've addressed the issues that I had that I was looking at this, making sure that it required proper notice, and a conditional use permit is not just another way of stamping approval if you pay enough money. That's not how this works. And we recognize that each one is slightly different. And we move forward trying to keep a handle on things. So that's all I have. Thank you.
All right. Other questions from the commission? I'd like to just check and see if anybody would like to take a short break. Could we take, looks like there may be some public comment out there, and we've been sitting here for about an hour and a half. So why don't we take a 10-minute break, and we'll be back at 10:35. We're at that point where we want to ask for public comment. So we ask that if you would like to make members of the public would like to make a comment, please come forward and state your name and make your comment. We have to make sure at the microphone that everything's being recorded because of our meetings do need to be fully recorded. So make sure the little green circle is on, not the red one, when you get up to the microphone. Is there any public comment?
I'm going to read this because I'm a terrible public speaker and I'll probably stutter or whatever. Chairman Roth, commissioners, my name is Timothy Kale. I live in this special district. The special restrictions explicitly protect the people living in this district as opposed to it being implicitly protected, which is open to interpretation. I can see no reason for removing the restrictions other than to create ambiguity. I therefore wish to state my opposition to the removal of these restrictions. Thank you.
Are there other comments, public comments, or questions?
Commissioners, my name is Jean Riley. I'm the president of the Eastgate Water Sewer Association, and I'm going to go ahead and I've got some copies, and I'm going to go through this, but my testimony may be a little different, but at least you'll have some documentation.
Thank you.
Eastgate Water and Sewer has a real concern with the changes of the special district. And one of the reasons is you kept talking about that the original zoning limits the use of the properties within the district's boundaries. This was to prevent additional adverse impact on the properties within the district. And the new zoning language that has been developed with your new zoning does allow for the zoning subject to a conditional use permit. I did check with your staff, and I made a phone call and asked the question about a conditional use permit. And I said, so how is a conditional use permit done? And they said, if a conditional use permit is submitted and complete, then it's issued. It's not saying that it goes to the public, or if it does go to the public, if it meets all the requirements, it's automatically pretty much gets issued, even if the public is against it. That's not right. And so again, there's no protection for the adjacent land owners with a conditional use permit. And I'm going to use Helena Sand and Gravel pit site as an example. If they want to expand, that was done that when they came in originally, they were 1,000 feet from any property boundaries, so they did not have to notify the public. They did not have to notify the adjacent landowners. And when that was done, everybody thought that Helena Sand and Gravel was expanding, and they were going to put a new pit on the corner of Lake Helena and Canyon Ferry on the northeast corner, because that's where they had their signs. That's not where they put it. The change in zoning could result in impacts to the Water and Sewer Association, which is over 2,000 residents. I'm not going to go through the background because I think you understand that. I did review the existing growth policy and the maps, and maps indicating existing uses is only for future uses, not existing uses. And when I looked at it, the association's wastewater systems property, which is on the east side of Lake Helena Drive, is indicated as rural residential in your zoning, in your land use plan, which means I cannot have a wastewater system there because the uses are for agricultural activities, growing, raising, selling, agribusiness, agrotourism, agricultural programming, and education and commercial and manufacturing, residential, recreation, and caretakers facilities. That's not consistent with a wastewater treatment facility and our system. So when the growth policy was put together, why didn't they look at existing land uses, which was being used, and why didn't they look at their zoning? Because the zoning also had the community mixed use, which would be where the Helena Sand, they changed that to industrial. It was, if you looked at the zoning for this zone, this 43, it met the requirements of a community mixed use, which means a mix of residential, commercial activities that support residential neighborhoods, offices, and retail. That was the plan. That was the idea of what would go in. That would be consistent with the surrounding areas. But now it's changed, they changed the land use to commercial corridor industrial for that property, for Helena Sands property, and it does not exclude larger industrial areas. The thing that was interesting when I read the zoning and the land use plan did not work. The land use planning had no comments from the city of East Helena. It is directly adjacent to the city of East Helena, and it's directly adjacent to the school district. So right now you're looking at an industrial commercial facility that will be adjacent to East Helena and adjacent to East Helena schools, and no comments or information. They were not contacted. So they didn't even know about it when I contacted them, which is kind of scary in my book because people should know. And so the thing is, and then when I looked at, the other thing I looked at is concerning zoning and everything concerning expansion of the facility for Helena Sand. If they wanted to expand, the more they expand, the more water they use. They can dig down to within 10 feet of the upper aquifer, which means they can dig down within 10 feet of where people are drinking water wells are going in. And if it contaminates it, the people can't go back to Helena Sand to prove it. They have to drill new wells. And the other thing is the upper aquifer is going down. We have lost 3 wells from Eastgate. We had to drill a brand new well, which we had earlier. And that's because we lost 3 of our upper level aquifer wells. So it is a very big concern on water. And then, so the other thing I did check was the DEQ regulations. If the DEQ, somebody wants to come in and get an open cut permit, so say they want to do a conditional use permit, if there's zoning in place, the permit applications have to comply with the zoning. So with the zone, whatever the zoned area is, or, so that was my concern is if the appropriate land use operations, if it changes to industrial, that means DEQ, because it's not commercial mixed use, that means DEQ issues the permit because it's zoned correctly. They wouldn't go to the public, they wouldn't stop them. So that's another thing is, permit applications of sand and gravel included amendment applications, add acreage or change post-mining use. They have to comply. They must include a statement from the appropriate local government to certify the form provided by the department and the proposed mine site and plan of operation compliance with local zoning regulations. So right now, if you zone this, right now the zoning regulations say mines are not in there, but you're saying that mines can expand through a commercial use. DEQ has to let them expand. So therein is another concern. Before, when it was zoned that it could not be in there, that they could not expand, DEQ would not allow it. So there are some concerns that I have, and like I said, is right now my wastewater, I can't technically have where it is because your growth policy doesn't allow it. And so whoever did the growth policy didn't look at existing land uses and existing zoning to say, why didn't you use the existing zoning to determine the land uses? That's just a really good question, because if the land use was, for example, my wastewater system, it should be consistent where it's not. And that's been there for 50 years. So it's kind of what was missed and how was it missed? And then the last thing that people keep asking about is, concerning what happens, is it a takings, for lack of a better word? Are we taking from hell in a sand? Remember that when the original zoning went in 2008, it was hell in a sand. It is no longer hell in a sand. Hell in a sand was sold in 2022 to a new company. That company was sold. So that company is under, when they purchased it, they knew the zoning was, so they would not go forward and say, oh, we need to expand, because the zoning prevented the expansion. So when it was saying it's industrial so they can expand, that makes no sense again. So what we really need to do is, when the growth policy was done, they should have looked at the citizens initiated zoning and see, there could be some that still need to be cleaned up, and I admit, but if there is an overall area, it should have looked at those and tried to get those into the growth policy, so the growth policy would be consistent with the citizens initiated zoning, which is higher than a policy. It's kind of a level up in the policy, because the policy is the overarching, and then you have the zoning, which is a level up, and you have citizens initiated zoning, which is a level up, and it's kind of like laws and rules and regs. So I'm available for questions, but I just don't understand why we want to come in and make that these changes are to the growth, consistent with the growth policy, but the growth policy wasn't consistent with the land use. So I think before you take an action, you really need to look at your growth policy and make sure that that's consistent with the land uses and maybe the zoning, and maybe put this on hold and come back later. Thank you. Do you have any questions for me?
We generally do not respond with questions at this point. Yeah, other public comment. Is there other public comment?
Commissioner Rolfe, members of the commission, or Chair Rolfe, excuse me. My name is Jacob Miles, Jacob spelled Jakob, Miles, Miles. I'm normally someone who's a big fan of standardization, and I can appreciate the angle that this would provide for the sake of standardization. But what worries me is eliminating redundancies when they are something that can help protect us from future problems. This could potentially open the door to more confusion, more misunderstandings of our regulations, which would cause more headaches for the citizens of Lewis and Clark County in the future. I also think that if we're going to standardize, the pie chart we saw earlier showed that 19 of the special districts do not allow for expansion. And that was the highest number that we saw on the pie chart. So if we're going to standardize, I think it would make more sense to standardize based off of the most common denominator and not allow these grandfathered uses or structures the ability to expand, which was in the rules already and would be explicitly taken out, and they would be able to expand based off of these amendments proposed. I also think that this takes away, these zoning districts were brought forward by the people of Lewis and Clark County, and this could take away the power of the people of the county and the voters that they have the right to by removing these restrictions and allowing an entity with a large amount of money to be able to come in and buy the lots around a grandfathered establishment to be able to expand, where as long as they could convince a future commission that they meet most of the criteria that we saw earlier, they would be able to expand. So I think removing the special restrictions can create concern and confusion among the people of Lewis and Clark County, which we don't need. I think we should keep redundancies in place to protect the county and the residents of this special zoning district for the future, and allowing grandfathered entities to expand when we have explicitly said that they cannot up to this point is opening a door that could have drastically catastrophic impacts in that community and for the people that surround that special district as well. So I would encourage you to vote no on these amendments today. Thank you very much.
Hello, good morning. I think, Mr. Chair, it's still morning. Chair Rolfe, Commissioners Payne and Hunhausen. My name is Mary Ann Dunwell. I'm a state senator and I represent the East Valley and the good people who very well could be affected detrimentally. So I agree with standardization and streamlining, throwing out the unnecessary. But what I heard you say was, oh, these restrictions will still be in place. We're just wordsmithing and just deleting them from the document, but they're still in place. I think you're opening a can of worms there. I mean, we know how litigious our society is now. I can just see an industrial organization, company, suing to be able to expand, suing to be able to go into this residential areas, unless we have the wording in black and white on the document. And frankly, updating is very important. If we're going to update, let's keep the list. Let's add data centers. Nobody wants to live next to a data center with all the noise and the loss of water, as you pointed out, Commissioner Payne. You also, Commissioner Payne, mentioned something that a lot of people aren't here. I heard from a constituent who happens to be a friend. I told her I was coming to this. She said, thank you very much. My whole neighborhood is really concerned. She works. I mean, she works for a PT office. And how would you feel living next to a gravel pit? Yes, currently there's a setback, and there's an irrigation ditch for agriculture in between the houses, at least on the north side, and the gravel pit. I remember knocking doors, can't even remember which year it was, but on the south side, one guy I remember saying, my foundation's cracked from the gravel pit. And also the base of my toilet cracked. I mean, why risk? Why risk just simply because we want to tighten up a document and standardize? Frankly, that list should be standard for every area in Lewis and Clark County. And like I said, let's add data centers to that. Let's see what I wrote. And I just, I appreciate the zoning to be protective of communities so that the residents can be comfortable and enjoy Montana's quality of life. I mean, I applaud you for doing the zoning plan and the growth plan. Let's not overdo it, though. And as Mr. Miles said, let's not remove the important redundancy. It's like, I see a member of your staff there who I used to work with at DEQ. It's like a institutional control that we have out in East Helena with the water, and with kids playing in the dirt. Can't have your kid playing in the dirt there. These are institutional controls that are written in documents. They'll be forgotten if they're not written in black and white. So, I mean, it really shouldn't be that hard. Just keep the list in. I don't know what the big deal is, because it's an editing issue, right? But these folks, it's their lives, their families' lives. So thank you for your time. Please vote no for lifting the restrictions.
Yeah, is there any other public comment?
Yeah, my name is Deborah Williams. I live in Eastgate. I was one of the very first homeowners in Eastgate 1 on the west side of Eastgate 1. And I've watched the community grow. And I'm just very concerned for the whole county of Lewis and Clark County, especially in the East Helena area, because I feel like the residents that have lived there for a long time and been assured of having water and a community that's a good community to live in is being ignored. There's so much growth in East Helena. We're looking at 1,500 houses in Rose Hills. We're looking at 4,000 houses in Oakland Properties. We're looking at another subdivision with 300. We already have had a drop in our water levels to where we've had to reduce our water level, our use of water. East Helena City is having problems with water. And I just feel that this change, which would potentially allow Helena Sand and Gravel to impact our water system, our wastewater system, the normal everyday people that pay their taxes are not being taken into consideration that live out there. I think this whole growth policy, yes, you need it, but it's being projected in favor of industry and future subdivisions, and we're not being considered at all. And it's having a huge impact on our community that has been there for 50 years. And we've had the fortunate, for Eastgate 1 and 2, we've had the fortunate ability of people that understand issues to look ahead at the water and the sewer. And as Mrs. Riley spoke, I just think you need to keep the special restrictions in there because we are being left out of the picture. And it's going to have a huge impact on us, the people that have lived there and paid their taxes for 50 years. And we're being told, well, we need gravel for the new developments. We need water for the new developments. But to heck with you guys. So anyway, I agree with what has been said. The special restrictions need to be kept in place. It needs to be specific. And the other thing I noticed in the beginning conversations was you saying, well, these industries are grandfathered in. What's already there is grandfathered in. But when you look at the outline of the district, it's the district of the property that's pretty much owned and run by the gravel pit. And when the gravel pit was first, I was telling some other people, when it was first approved, it was there will be no large trucks running by the school district. Everything will go out and around. Well, guess what? We have double trailer, big trucks on all those roads running right by the school, 25 miles an hour, right through the subdivision, and the roads are falling apart. And who has to pay for that? We do. So really consider keeping those special restrictions in there. It's very important to protect the people that have lived there. Thank you.
Is there other public comment?
Good morning, Commissioners. I've kind of set myself up for failure. I work for Ashgrove Cement. I am a resident within the district, Neil Campbell, and I live on Metal Arc Road. So we are on the back side or the north side of the proposed pit. The irrigation canal saves us from being any closer to it, but it doesn't keep them coming closer to us. I'm just here to let my good friends know that I don't work for Helena Sand and Gravel, but our company does own Helena Sand and Gravel. We are CRH Americas. And, but I'm here just speaking on my own behalf. I feel that that the commission needs to be aware of maybe the future of what CRH is trying to do in the state of Montana. In the past 2 years, they've purchased 3 legitimate sand and gravel operations throughout the state. So they're striving to make themselves known and grow and have growth within the state. They purchased Ash Grove Cement many years ago. It's been a good venture for us as a business. I think we've done due diligence within the county of Jefferson County to be respectful and to be the type of business that people want to have around. But I just wanted maybe to let you know that what I see from my own personal perspective, and I'm retiring in the month of May, so I'll no longer be out there, but I've been there for 34 years and I've pretty much seen it all. And I feel that CRH's position within Montana is one of growth and one of expansion and one of building and one of making a profit. I do believe that they are concerned with the livelihood of the members in the communities that they serve. But I also feel that their intent is to expand. And under the conditions that we saw the gravel pit move in, we built our home in '96, so we were there way before they were. And we all saw the signage that was now on the northeast corner of the roundabout, the future site of Helena Sand and Gravel. And they never once put a shovel to that piece of property. And they moved the pit in right behind our house. And that was a bit of a surprise. In respect to them, we have not seen some of the adverse results of them being there, other than one that hasn't really even been talked about and noted is the noise factor. So our property, like I said, sits just north of that boundary line with the canal in between us and them. And they start their operations at 5 a.m. in the morning. I know that. I sleep with my windows open and I can hear the screw conveyors fire up. I know exactly the process that's going on. I worked in maintenance with Ash Grove Cement for 20 years, and now I'm the shipping supervisor for the company, handling all the fuels and the truck traffic and whatnot. So I'm well aware of what's going on with their facility and what's happening, and it is noticeable. It is there. You hear it. It's known at 5 a.m. It drowns out the birds. It drowns out the silence. It drowns out the reason why we originally decided to build on that 2.5 acre parcel. So them being there has come as a surprise. We've lived with it. I would choose to not support any recommendation that would allow them to increase their footprint on that property. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Is there other public comment? Is there any more public comment?
Yes, Commissioners. My name is Nick Tennis. Last name is spelled Thennis. And I live on Wildfire Road, which is directly adjacent to Helena Sand and Gravel's pit. My big concern is with your growth plan, is that if this growth plan is supposed to be for the whole county, for all of Lewis and Clark County, then everybody in Lewis and Clark County should be notified when they do a CUP. Anywhere. I think that eliminates the problem of people not noting or not noticing that there's an expansion or a change that's going to be made in your growth policy. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Is there other public comment?
Good morning. My name is Anita Lincoln, and I also live in the Wildfire subdivision. This growth policy, I think with any growth policy, still has to reflect on what's been and what is in all the land use and the homeowners and the farms. And they need to be the ones to decide what to do with their property, not some growth policy across the county. Or the other thing is, like he showed where there's a yellow zone for this part of the county and there's an orange zone for this part of the county. That shouldn't be there then either. It should just be a blanket zone. There shouldn't be any differences. This zoning's 43 that you're trying to remove. My understanding is there's nobody wants to say that they're willing to have that changed that lives there. Everybody's against it, other than we haven't heard, of course, from the gravel company. But we kind of know. That's how they went in. Very quietly. They didn't keep their promises then. You can pretty much bet they're not going to in the future. Right now, we have definite businesses written down. Don't even come to us that you want to put a casino in this area. Just don't even bother. 5 years from now, if you take that wording off, someone's going to come and buy my 20 acres. And they're going to say, yep, we're going to put a casino back here. I don't care if there's houses there. Tell me it's not going to get approved. You guys probably won't even be here either. I might. I can sell part of my property. At least it says I can on my covenants. Doesn't say it according to the county regulations now because of other growth policies they put into effect since I bought my 20 acres. So what's to keep me from putting in an open pit in my back 20 acres? I've been there. It's my property. You know, I can go out and start digging a hole just like they did with their big machines. And I got houses right across the street. We'll just send them a letter saying, hey, we're going to do this. County thinks it's a great idea. You know, this is what we need to remember. We fought for this years ago to keep our area so that we can have a good life. We still pay our taxes, and yes, we use cement. And yes, we buy sand from Helena Gravel to keep our road up in shape. You know, we buy road mix. We call them up. They come and deliver it. It's 2 blocks away, and we still get charged for transportation. You know, but we need that, and I understand that. But there's other places to put it. There again, like the data center. And I put a data center on the back part of my 20 acres. Might not be very big, but I could make it really tall. You know, what's to stop this? And this is why we had it in writing back in 2008. The thing, too, we forget, it went to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court was okay with it with the growth policy. The growth policy now that you're using needs to stay with part of the growth policy back then. You know, and there's other places where items are grandfathered in. It worked back here. It's worked for 20 years. Let's leave it alone. Who wants to change it? One person or big corporation out of however many are in there? About 150. I tried to write letters to everybody because the letter I got from the county didn't explain squat. And I encouraged as many neighbors as I could. I wrote 142 letters and sent them out. people that live out in that area, people that aren't in this zoning district. I try to get people that lived out of it. I can't afford to send it to everybody myself. But I tried, and to get people to know that we want it that way. We want to keep the area like it is. You know, granted, there's going to be growth. Granted, people want to build more houses. Let Helena Sand put more houses on what's left of their property. And those people, if they choose to live right next to a hole, can do so. But let's not move the hole next to the people that didn't choose to live next to it. The other thing, I'm kind of curious about you three. Do any of you live in any of these 35 special zoning districts that he's talking about, that they're going to change? Do you live in a subdivision that has really strict zoning? Look at the one up by Blue Cross. I don't think you can even have a different roof color. I mean, when you take a look, they're all gray, right? They all blend. I mean, who wants to live like that? But if you can choose to live like that, that's one thing. Having 3 people or that 7-person planning department decide for all of us in this zoning district what we want is not right. We didn't vote for those 7 people. Yes, we did vote for you. We voted for you guys to work for us and to represent our feelings. And we put our feelings on paper in 2008 to do this. The other thing, I guess, I just still feel we know that in pretty much anything in life, things are grandfathered in. And this is something that really needs to be grandfathered into the growth policy. This area can stay rural. This area can stay residential. It doesn't need to have large industrial. It doesn't need to have a wrecking yards. You know, gravel pits, doesn't need that. Open pit mining, nobody wants it. Granted, it's in my backyard, but it is my backyard. And I work hard. You go and Google my address, we have a park, and we've put in 1,400 trees and shrubs and bushes and a pond. And we make our place nice, and we don't need a gravel pit next to it. We want our areas to be nice. A lot of our neighbors have lots of trees. They have beautiful homes. They keep them up. They have respect for others. They like their neighbors in most of them. You know, and we want to keep this area nice. And that's what we're asking that you guys would do for us. That's why we voted for you. So, thank you.
Are there other public comments? We have any other public comments?
Good morning, Chairman Rolfe and Commissioners. My name is Gary Peterson. I have lived out in this area for pushing 55 years. So I have a little bit of history on what has went on out there. Now, after our last meeting, I asked some of the neighbors if they got these letters that Anita Lincoln sent out of the county. Well, yeah, we did. Well, why weren't you at the meeting? You have no interest? Yeah, we have interest, but we don't feel that our interest is really represented there. It's going to happen whatever they wish. So it's a waste of time. And I don't quite feel that way, but I do have some real bitches with the government, living out there 55 years. When I moved out there, Canyon Ferry was a gravel road, which most people don't realize. That went for some years, and finally somebody discovered that the county had been taking public tax money to pave that road, and it had never been paved. So that got the county on the stick, and we got that road paved with a mediocre paving job, which lasted for years and years. Now we have got a freeway out there. And I like it in the sense that it's neat, it's good, it's not full of chuck holes. But we have to pay for that highway. First off, they took about an acre of my land for a settling pond. That was one of my best building lots if I decided to subdivide. Not only that, we spend every day, mainly in the summer, listening to trucks, hundreds of them, not just a few, using their jake brakes, going up and down that road. So we pay a big price for having that pavement there. Now, that part you kind of accept. Then Hell in the Sand moves in. Well, as all we have to do is get a good southeast wind. We smell asphalt all day long and hear the faint noise of backup alarms. Then across the road, we have a construction company, 100 yards from my house, that we hear backup alarms like they're in your living room all day long through the summer. So really, I think we're paying our dues out there, and we haven't bitched. We've thought that it was part of progress. But it's coming to the point where does this progress end? Do we have to support more of it? Now, everybody that's lived out there seems to have been happy with the area. We haven't had any major catastrophes the way it's been. And it's just, it's been a pleasant 50 years. I can see that maybe that isn't going to continue. We start getting more government pushed on us, it's bound to change. And like I say, anything the government has done for us before, we've paid for, not monetarily, but in other ways. And I'm afraid that this is going to happen if the government keeps intervening out there and changing things. So it's just crazy. They put up these flyers and, oh, nobody can do this. Well, this is going to be against the law. Well, I can look at Hell in the Sand and Gravel. That was shut down as a cattle ranch because of pollution. Then Hell in the Sand moves in there, which I understand they bought it for $1. And they have hauled this gravel basically all over the county. Another good example of it is the town pump. That was another cattle farm operation. Oh, it's so contaminated, but it appears town pump had enough money to get around all that. So I don't really believe most of what's being pushed out or said. I really have the feeling that this is a liberal socialist operation. It's heading towards communism the way it's going. And I hate to think that. I'm 83 years old and I've never felt that way about the government until things like this happen. So that's my thoughts. I'm totally against this.
Hi, my name's Katie Brodowie, and I live just north of the Helena Sand and Gravel in that residential district.
Your name again? I'm sorry.
Katie Brodowie, Brodowy. Can I use this slideshow to back up to one of your growth policies? Is that okay? So I heard before about you talking about how we needed to align these Part 1 zoning districts with this growth policy and the Part 2 greater zoning district that we have. And I think it's really important that you actually read what you have written here, that these Part 1 zoning districts that are well-defined and strategic purposes align with the county's growth policy. This is a very defined area we're talking about here. It has a very defined purpose that we're dealing with, and it is pretty much that pit. That this Zone 1 thing we already went through, and it went through to the Supreme Court, and even they agreed that this wasn't, while not ideal for the gravel pit, it wasn't putting undue hardship on them in their operation, and it was upheld. That it didn't completely limit them, and it wasn't created solely for the purpose of restricting that use. It was to create this greater residential character that exists out there. And furthermore, when you look at that Supreme Court document, it says things like, just because this use existed doesn't mean that we should, it's a use that shouldn't happen in this residential of an area. And saying it's grandfathered in and allowing it to continue to be used that way, I don't think is the correct move for this growth policy as a whole. This whole area is now outlined as being suburban development that outlines that zoning 1 boundary currently. It's not, a gravel pit does not fit within that definition or idea at all. Additionally, when you look at the use, like one of my biggest things is the noise that it creates. You hear the alarms going at 5 a.m. You hear those things grinding up, and it is a constant pressure almost of sound in the air that occurs from this activity. And there's 2 elementary schools, there's a middle school, and our brand new, almost $30 million high school is kitty corner to this lot. Taking away any part of that 1,000-foot boundary from that high school and allowing that noise to encroach further upon that school, I think is a huge mistake and is kind of negligent to all the money that us property owners have put forward to support these kids in allowing that noise to encroach upon this learning area. And there's lots of studies out there about how noise directly negatively impacts cognitive function and learning and things like that. And I don't know if any of you have ever been blessed to have an active construction site next to your homes, but it is something that is like a constant presence while it's there. And allowing this thing to creep closer and closer to these people's homes, my home, is why people are here today. And I don't think it's because we're the really angry outliers. It's because we're the people who are blessed with the opportunity to be here for 2.5 hours, and that we can take time from our jobs and make it known for those of us that can't. My last thought when you were talking about aligning with the new growth policy or aligning with other Zone 1 districts, this is the chart that was mentioned earlier, that there are 19 Part 1 zoning districts that do not allow for expansion of non-conforming uses, that in this area being mining activities. That's the majority of those Part 1 uses do not allow that to happen. The language that's being changed in our zoning district allows that to be expanded upon, those non-conforming uses to be expanded upon. And it's the combination of removing the special restrictions and allowing these non-conforming uses to be expanded that I think is the problem that most people have here is you, while not directly allowing this expansion to happen, you are creating a path forward by removing the special zoning districts and changing that language to allowing non-conforming uses to expand. And I've been a part of CUPs before, and it's like there are defined requirements, but it's also like a trading game. Like you give a little, you take a little, and there are all sorts of things that can be loopholed or avenues created by offering things in balance of that CUP requirements. So on one hand, it sounds like, oh, it's just not on that non-conforming uses list, so it won't happen. But that's not a guarantee. And these people are here because you're taking away their guarantee that they have currently that this won't happen. By changing it, you're allowing a path forward. And while not directly evident right now, it now exists. And I think that's the part that's important to everybody here. Thank you.
Is there any other public comment? Is there any other public comment? Just have staff have any response?
Chairman, Commissioners, thank you for allowing staff to respond to some of the public comment. Staff would like to reiterate a few of the items. As it relates to the zoned land uses found in the zoning regulations, again, staff will reiterate that the removal of the special restrictions land use category would not allow those land uses to be implemented into the zone district. This is a Part 1 zoning district. The county is charged with implementing the zoning regulations as well as all of the other Part 1 zoning regulations. So essentially, we would be in charge of determining whether or not a use, land use would fit within the permitted or conditional land use sections as part of the implementation of that zoning district. Some other conversation in regards to the growth policy. As part of the growth policy, there is an associated future land use map that generally maps out potential areas for potential uses. As I mentioned, the growth policy is not a regulatory document. Zoning is a regulatory document where we have to implement those regulations that are contained within. So they kind of speak to each other. It's kind of what I was going to mention. If there's changes to zoning, it usually takes an analysis to look at the growth policy to determine if that is in alignment with the growth policy before those changes can be made. In regards to some of the public comment around public noticing, staff and community development and planning does follow all state statutes as it's required for public noticing for any type of application as it relates to zoning. So a conditional use permit or a text amendment or even a new zone district, we would follow all state statutes as it relates to those requirements. That's generally some of the issues I wanted to mention up here before we continue. Again, staff is recommending those changes to the non-conforming use, non-conforming structures sections. Staff believes they are in alignment with our best practices as it relates to zoning, as it relates to the Part 2 zoning districts, and as it relates to the growth policy. Those are the only items I wanted to mention. If you have any more questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Are there other questions from the commission?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Mr. Gonzalez, well, first of all, I really appreciate all the public comment and read all the public comment from the what's been sent in, and of course sat in on the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting and understand, and especially I get this. There's a real, you live in a neighborhood and there's a real emotional response to some of these things, and I get the feeling of loss in terms of removing the special restrictions category. But Mr. Gonzalez, again, just to reiterate, whether that special restrictions category exists or not, the only things that are permitted in this district are the permitted uses and or the conditional uses, correct?
Chairman Commissioner Hunthausen, that's correct.
So it's unnecessary to have that special restriction as well. The list isn't exhaustive. I mean, if we were going to do special restrictions, we'd have to think of everything and try and list everything out there. But it remains that only the things that are conditional uses or permitted uses are permitted in the district.
Correct.
No matter. That's the case. So not short-sighting anybody or the situation. Actually, as you just mentioned, best practices and consistency would be to remove that section because it doesn't exist in other districts, nor is it a best practice, even when we look across the state or zoning in general that we know of anyway. That's my understanding. Is that
correct?
Okay. And then I'm back to notices. You mentioned that we follow all state statute for notices, but you did briefly mention this, but we go far above and beyond. We do not have to notify everyone in the zoning district, right? We just have to put it in the paper twice and put up signs. That's all we have to do.
Correct.
But we have chosen an internal policy that, hey, we're not going to do that. We want everyone to know about what's going on. So we mail a letter saying that these proceedings are going to be happening and there's a consideration of change to every property in a zoning district if we're going to do an amendment like this, correct?
Correct.
So we go above and beyond the notice requirements already. So I just want to reiterate that. The other thing is there was public comment related to the growth policy and the Part 2 zoning. This district is not subject to the Part 2 zoning. It is, because it's a Part 1 zoning district, it remains under its Part 1 zoning district regulations, correct? So there was some confusion there. It's, at least I thought I heard that people were talking about different uses and those kinds of things that are in Part 2 zoning, but this isn't subject to that. And one of the things I think this commission is trying to do is keep this district in place. We don't have to now that there's Part 2 zoning. We could move to start eliminating Part 1 districts, but I don't want to do that. I really appreciate and I support citizen-initiated zoning. However, all of our zoning has to meet our growth policy, and there's going to be change over time based on those changing of our guiding documents and other factors that might come into place. But one of the things I wanted to mention as well is I heard about pre-existing uses or pre-existing conditions. I think it was Gene Riley that talked about Eastgate and Eastgate 1 or 2 that has their wastewater systems and it's been there for 40 years or 50 years or whatever it is. That's a pre-existing use, right? So that use is not in threat in any way. It was pre-existing the zoning. The zoning came in 2008, so anything that was there prior to that has the right to remain under the zoning standards and continue as is. And then if there were, under these proposed regs, if there were a proposed expansion and or change, then they'd have the opportunity to apply for a conditional use permit, but no guarantee. Correct?
Chairman, Commissioner, so wastewater treatment facilities you'll see is listed under permitted uses under the land use category. So there is no additional zoning review for an expansion of that type of facility located within the zone district.
Yeah, sorry, I missed that. So it's two things. It was pre-existing plus it's permitted.
Correct.
So no threat to that use, and no confusion with Part 2 zoning because Part 2 zoning doesn't have any jurisdiction within this boundary.
That is correct.
Right. Okay. Good. I wanted to make sure that was the case. I was trying to think of other questions I had for you to clarify. I think, Mr. Chair, I'm good. I'll let other people ask questions for a minute.
Okay. Any other questions?
Phil, when this the zoning district number 43, and I I think they said it was put in what, 2008? And did you work on that? Were you here then?
Chairman Commissioner Payne, no, I was not here at that time.
Okay. Is it the practice of our county staff to work with groups they're trying to do a special zoning district? So did the county advise them, or do you know?
Chairman Commissioner Payne, yes, so Part 1 zoning districts are an allowed zoning district in state statutes. It's kind of outlined there. Essentially, the property owners work with community development planning, so the county planning department, to implement and create the zoning districts. So with essentially, since the county is going to take charge of the zoning regulations at the end, staff is there to kind of assist with that development of that zoning districts. And that is what occurred with this department here, community development planning, with special zone district number 43 in 2008.
Are special restrictions, maybe not these exactly, but do they occur in any of the other zoning districts in Lewis and Clark County?
So the special restrictions with permitted and conditional uses does not exist in any of the other Part 1 or Part 2 zone districts. As I mentioned previously, in 2008, it was staff's opinion at that time that we do not put a special restrictions. It was not best practices then. It is not best practices now. And thus staff is here with that recommendation for the text amendment.
Thank you, Phil. I have no more questions.
All right. Any other questions from the commission? Any other questions from the commission? I think I'm prepared to close the public hearing. Is there any need for that continuing? All right. We will close the public hearing. Now it's time for us to discuss the text amendments that are for the members of the commission to discuss these text amendments that have been proposed. I think when it comes to some of the zoning stuff, I've been a little bit of a thorn in the side before, because I'm very much a property rights person. And I voted against some of the part 2 zoning, because I just felt like that it had gone too far. If I had any inkling that I felt we were destroying property rights, that we were hurting people intentionally here, I would be voting against this. But I'm leaning towards doing as the commission did, or the Planning and Zoning Commission, leaning towards moving to approve this, because I don't believe we've taken away anything that was there before, and we've given a lot of opportunity for public participation in any changes that might come up in the future within this Part 1 zoning. What are your thoughts? Anybody else? Yeah. Commissioner Hunthouse.
Mr. Chair, but yeah, I mean, I have to say that, nothing like this is done without some angst and a lump in your gut, and having to make decisions that are difficult. And I look out at the crowd at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, and then this crowd, and there's people here that I really respect, and some that I call friends, and likely will disagree with them, and that's part of that deal. And part of leadership is having to do things that are hard sometimes. But I go back to some of my comments, and that is that I think that one of our mission and one of our charges is, when we implement and when we put regulations, policies, growth policies forward. Those policies have to stand the test of time, the test of durability, of legal durability, of durability of action when things happen. And so I look at it through this lens, and I try to set the emotional side over here, which is really challenging because I got a lump in my gut right now. But I look at it from the growth policy we have in place that we took over a year to implement, and it was a very public process, and all were invited to participate in that process. And we got to a place where we approved a growth policy that would move us forward into the coming future. And this chapter that we've been referring to is called Future Landscape and Development, chapter number 6. And so we're looking at where we go from here. How do we make our policies and procedures work with our new and existing growth policy, work with the recently passed Part 2 zoning, and how do we take that into the future? I, again, am a big supporter of citizen-initiated zoning. I was happy when people brought this forward, and we went through the process to try and make it as best we could. But I think looking back, and now with our new growth policy, as I've discussed, the section of special restrictions is unnecessary. It's found nowhere else. It isn't standard. If you look at best practices in zoning across our state, it's not a best practice from my look anyway. And it's unnecessary because we look at, or we have very well delineated those things that are acceptable in zoning. And then the other piece to this is those pre-existing non-conforming uses. So when zoning goes into place anywhere, the Part 2 zoning, Part 1 zoning across our county, anything that was happening within that district prior to the zoning going in place was allowed to remain. And that's what we call our grandfather clause to things. And so that is there. Now, those pre-existing uses, having a standardization across Part 1 and Part 2 zoning where there is a process for those pre-existing uses to be allowed to apply for expansion or change, I think that makes sense. It's probably more durable. It's probably more defendable, if you will, to allow for that opportunity. And it doesn't mean that there's any guarantee there. And so I appreciate us trying to bring policies and recommendations forward to make our zoning better and more durable and more in alignment with our growth policy. And if we don't do that, I think we're not doing our job. And sometimes that's going to be hard, and it's going to be in the face of people being frustrated with us or angry with us because they don't want to see change happen, and or there's something that it creates a very emotional response to some of this. So I'm trying to look at it without the emotion and look at it from that, really trying to make these better, more durable, and more consistent with our growth policy. And that's where I come back to, and that's where I have to make my decision based on that, along with what I've heard from people. But I haven't heard a compelling argument that flies in the face of these recommendations. I think that all of those concerns and those potential safeguards are still in place with the policies and process if we pass this. So I'm going to support the recommendation to amend our Part 1 zoning for 43, as recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Mr. Payne, anything?
I have just a couple of comments. I'm concerned and surprised that so many of the speakers here talked about if we remove the special limitations, the the special restrictions. Well, that means they go away entirely. And I'm concerned you're not seeing this. We already have a list of things you can do. Those are all the things. They're not, you don't pick and choose. That is what you can do in this section of your property. You can't do anything else. And that is the limitation. That's the way our laws work. And it's important that our laws and the way we conduct our community treats all people equally. And I've picked up some thoughts that, maybe this is because Helena Sand and Gravel or Montana Materials is a big, rich operation, and maybe that's why we're going to do this. That is not it. We're trying to treat our citizens the same. If you pay property taxes out there, and I'll bet they pay property taxes out there, but we try to look at it so that people are treated equally. And if our experts and the people that work here for Lewis and Clark County are not, they didn't get the job because they're my brother. We've got all these people work here and they are experienced engineers. They're educated. They really know. They're looking at the best things. And then we have the gentleman over here from the county attorney's office advising us, if we don't do this, this is, we're going to get sued, and that's not a good situation. So by getting rid of what appears to be extraneous language, because I think that's what the special restrictions are. What you can only allow to do these things. You cannot, and you don't need a separate statement about what you cannot do. This is it. You can do these things. You don't need to say what you can't be allowed to do. After all of the information that we've been presented with today, and I too have read letters from the homeowners out there and their concerns. And oh, by the way, I live not very far from a gravel pit out on it's north of Lincoln Road. And, that gravel pit was in there when we bought our house. And to me, it is a sign of employment and taxes and roads. I don't really feel all that bad about, and it isn't right across the canal from me. It's a ways away, but it's something we live with. And some people find it offensive. It's kind of like living next to a stockyards. Yeah, sometimes it's aromatic, but some of us, it smells like money. And that's why we have to do this. We have to be able to encourage people to move into our community, to build their homes, to have jobs, to have driveways. And we make the rules and try to abide by them. This appears to me, by taking out that one list, it makes the law better, more durable, and more consistent with what it is we're trying to do to provide for our citizens. And that is stability and predictability. And I think we've got enough of the experts telling us that this is the right thing to do, that I'm comfortable with voting to approve this change.
I think we should read, we have not read through the entire resolution. And Phil, would you mind reading that entire resolution for us so that we've got that in front of us?
Chairman, Commissioners, the resolution that I believe you're referring to is Resolution 2026-27 as Attachment A of the staff report being read into the record. It's a resolution of the Board of County Commissioners to amend the regulations for Special Zone District number 43. Whereas Lewis and Clark County's Community Development and Planning staff has proposed amendments to the regulations for Special Zoning District number 43, quote unquote, district, to remove the special restrictions section and to amend the nonconforming uses and definitions sections. Whereas the regulations for the district were adopted by the Lewis and Clark County Board of Commissioners, quote, County Commission, per Resolution 2028-86 on July 10th of 2008. And whereas the County Commission is authorized to amend the district regulations as set forth in Section 76.2.101 through 76.2.117 of the Montana Code annotated, and where all required notice regarding the proposed amendments have been provided in compliance with Section 7-1-2121 MCA and Section 76-2-101 through 76-2-117 MCA. And whereas a public hearing regarding the proposed amendments was held by the Planning and Zoning Commission on April 16th, 2026, whereas the Planning and Zoning Commission received and considered public testimony regarding the proposed amendments during the hearing, and whereas the Planning and Zoning Commission carefully reviewed, weighed and proposed amendments to the district's regulations, staff report, and its attachments, and all public comments and testimony provided, whereas the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval 7-0 of the proposed amendments as recommended by staff to the County Commission on April 16th of 2026, and whereas a public hearing regarding the proposed amendment was held by the County Commission on April 28th, 2026, whereas the County Commission received public testimony regarding the proposed amendments during this hearing, whereas the County Commission carefully reviewed and weighed the proposed amendments to the district's regulations, staff report, and its attachments, recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission, and all public comments and testimony provided. Now, therefore, be resolved by the Board of County Commissioners that the County Commission does hereby adopt this resolution amending the regulations for Special Zoning District number 43 as shown on Exhibit A, attached hereto and made part thereof.
Thank you, Phil. Is there any further discussion about the resolution? Any further discussion? Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I would move that we approve Resolution 2026-27, a resolution to amend the regulations for Special Zoning District number 43, as presented by Mr. Gonzalez.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 2026-27. Is there any further comment? Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor of approving the Resolution 2026-27, the resolution to amend regulations for the Special Zoning District number 43 as presented by Phil Gonzalez, please say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. We are at the end of our regular agenda. We always leave time for members of the public to address the commission, bring up things that are not on today's agenda, but that are under the purview of the county commission. And so we always like to leave that opportunity there open. So is there any public comment on items that are not on today's agenda? Any public comment? Is there any public comment? Seeing none, we're adjourned.